As we would continue on with our story, we would now enter what would likely be the shortest part of Season 2, that covering the events of Drum Island in the Alabasta Saga, which, unlike in the original timeline, will end up taking a dramatic turn. But for starters, we begin with the Straw Hat crew, along with Princess Vivi, as they arrive to Drum Island. Over the course of their travels, just as in the original story, Nami would fall deadly ill with a fever after leaving Little Garden, and with the crew not having a doctor or anyone that could treat her, it was decided that the next island they would stop to, they would look to see if there was any doctor that could help. Much like in the original story, the Straw Hats would fall under attack by a band of pirates led by Wapol, who had eaten the Baku Baku no Mi, or the Munch Munch fruit. However, unlike in their original first skirmish with Wapol, things take a rather different turn. For one, you have to understand that Luffy, while he is similar to his canon self, his fighting style and his fighting prowess is a lot different than in the original timeline. The original Luffy was a jack-of-all-trades kind of fighter, someone who had to learn how to use his devil fruit powers and was sort of a free spirit, someone who just fought on the fly and used his raw and natural instincts. But this Luffy is very, very different. First, this Luffy is half human, half Atlantean, similar to the hero that he is named after. However, his half-Atlantean DNA gives him a distinct advantage over your average human or your average fighter. For one, he has strength greater than even 1,000 men. He has skin that's nearly bulletproof and cut-proof, and you have to have a distinct level of power or a special type of metal or mineral just to be able to do any real damage to him. On top of that, Luffy spent 7 years being proficient learning various martial arts as well as learning how to fight in spear play with the use of his trident. With extensive training under Vulko, he comes into this part of the story far more skilled, far more lethal, and far more capable than he was in the original timeline. This only adds to the strength of the crew as it's sort of a trickle-down effect. Now, Luffy has his crewmates who can fight beside him, and now to a degree, they have to fight to actually keep up. So safe to say, Wapol gets absolutely demolished, even worse than when he fought the Straw Hats in the original timeline. And with Vulko fighting by their side, Wapol's crew gets decimated even further. Now, this leads to a change of events when it comes to taking care of Nami. Since, just as in the original story, the crew would arrive in the town known as Bighorn, where they would meet the protector of the town and the guardian known as Dalton. Dalton would, in the original timeline, tell the Straw Hats of how Wapol took over and how he banished all but 20 of the doctors and kept them as hostages, forcing the people to have to beg for medical treatment whenever they needed it. But shortly before the Straw Hats arrived, a new pirate by the name of Blackbeard had attacked the country, and not only that, but decimated most of Wapol's forces. And while he was still powerful, he wasn't anything like he had been before. But now, the only doctor on the island capable of doing anything was Dr. Kureha, but she lived far off in a castle known as Drum Castle, which was said to be very high up in the mountains and was shaped like a drum. Now, Nami, in order to get the care that she needed, would have to be carried to the mountain, and this is where a change occurs. Luffy does not go alone when carrying Nami, but actually, Zoro goes with him. Primarily because with Vulko around and being as capable as he is, Vulko and Sanji, Usopp are more than capable enough of watching after the ship in the town while the others go on with Nami. Plus, with Luffy having the assistance of Zoro, who in this timeline has the Green Lantern ring of Alan Scott, who was a former member of the Gold Roger Pirates, this allows for them to clear and trek through the snow a lot easier than Luffy could by himself. Also, Because Luffy doesn't have to deal with the side effects of having the Gumu Gumu no Mi, his body, which would be a rubber body, isn't affected by the sub-degree temperatures. Remember, someone like Aquaman could go swimming in the Arctic Ocean with no shirt on, because his body is not affected by the harsh degrees of weather. Or at the very least, it would have to be something dramatically harsh to actually affect him. Usually something like extreme heat and prolonged exposure without any source of water. So because of that, Luffy and Zoro are actually able to pillage through the snow a lot more effectively. And if need be, Zoro can just use constructs to clear through the snow, making it a lot easier for them to get to Dr. Kureha. Just as in the original story, the Straw Hats would eventually meet with the Doctor, and they would end up meeting someone else, a short, stubby little reindeer that walked on its hind legs and wore a hat. This would be none other than Tony Chopper, a reindeer who ate the Hito Hito no Mi, or the human fruit, thus a reindeer that was given the power of human speech and could move and act like a human. As in the original story, the Straw Hats would learn about Chopper's past, about how Chopper became friends with the original owner of the castle and a good friend of Dr. Kureha, that being Dr. Hiroluke, who was considered a quack amongst the people, but fell ill with a deathly illness, and, to Chopper's dismay, tried to keep him away from a time. While Chopper was distrusting of most humans, save for Dr. Kureha, he did have extensive knowledge when it came to medical treatment and when it came to being a doctor. And for Luffy, he would be a lot more fascinated with Chopper, not just for him being a talking reindeer, but also a doctor. And because Luffy isn't a complete idiot in this story, he would actually see the benefits of getting a doctor for the crew. And while he would want Chopper along as a friend, he wouldn't just bring him along because he thought he was entertaining. So because of that, Luffy would make the offer for Chopper to join with the Straw Hats. But similar to the original story, Chopper would not want to incline on joining a pirate crew, instead wanting to stay longer with Dr. Kureha. Now, Wapol and his crew do eventually return, seeking to attack the castle. However, things still do not go well for Wapol, mainly because, as I've stated earlier, Luffy is far more skilled and far more capable than even his counterpart in the original timeline. Now, this kind of is a drag to say on and on again, but when you come to story arcs like this is where changing a fundamental part of a character can be so catastrophic, for both good and bad reasons. That's not to say that Luffy wasn't a capable character before, but with the current circumstances around his power set, his skills, and his overall attitude, it means that the fights that seem to go back and forth in the earlier parts of One Piece become a lot more one-sided, because despite trying his best and using the abilities of the Baku Baku no Mi, Wapol just does not have the firepower or any type of overall strength that can give him the advantage over Luffy. So Wapol's attack on Drum Castle goes as well as you would imagine. Plus, it doesn't help that Zoro, who is now a lot stronger than he was in the original story, given the benefit of using the Lantern Ring at his disposal, it means that Wapol and his crew are in for a world of hurt, and Luffy shows him no mercy. However, this does have a more profound effect on Chopper and Dr. Kureha, as they come to learn more about the pirates who had come seeking their help. Following Wapol's second failed attack, and with the day being saved, Luffy would once again make the pitch for Chopper to join the Straw Hat crew. After Chopper would remember the words of his old mentor, Dr. Hiroluke, about how he wanted for his young protege to travel out to the seas and to explore all around the world, Chopper would ultimately decide to join the Straw Hats, just as he had in the original timeline. And, just as before, Dr. Kureha would chase him off, scaring him with various weapons of a variety of sorts, as she wanted to use reverse psychology to make sure that the scared little reindeer would have the courage to want to leave and to actually do something with his life. and also because she wanted to avoid having a very tearful goodbye. But with that, Chopper would be introduced to the Straw Hats, to which he would become acclimated with his new friends, especially Vulko, who at first would mistake Chopper for a minx. This would cause the crew to wonder what exactly Vulko meant by this, as he would explain that there were a race of animal-like beings who were humanoids called minks. But, as Chopper would explain to the crew now in full, he was not a minx, but was actually a reindeer who had eaten the human fruit, and it gained the human abilities of a reindeer. As the Straw Hats would sail off from Drum Island, they would see that the castle that sat atop of the mountains would shoot off a giant blast of what appeared to be cherry blossoms, as Dr. Kureha, along with Dalton, were working to undo the effects that had been done to Drum Island, which caused it to snow all year long. Hopefully, this would be the cure that the island needed, and that it would be able to see spring once again. But with the adventures of Drum Island out of the way, what would the Straw Hats do as they made their way to their final destination, that being the country of Alabasta? Well, with a lot more free time on their hands between now and then, Vulko felt like it was time to take Luffy's training to the next level. He had spent 7 years teaching Luffy everything that he knew when it came to the arts of using the Trident Spear, all forms of combat, as well as learning the full extent of his capabilities as an Atlantean. But now there was something else. You see, Vulko was taking notice to see if anyone else on the crew were capable of learning a unique and special power, one that not many in the world knew of, a power of spirit. A power to harness one's own spirit to give it form in 3 distinct areas: the power of armor, the power of observation, and the power of the conquerors. Of course, it would take them many, many years before they could ever learn to harness such an ability. But there was nothing wrong with dipping your toes in the water, so to speak, to take that first step, to learn of this unique ability and all of the benefits that it gave you. But there was also something else, as Chopper was curious about his new crewmates and the new people whom he would come to know and love. Among them all was Luffy, who wasn't like anyone else he had ever seen. He was taking hits, damage from Wapol that should have been extensive, and yet outside of a few scratches, he seemed relatively fine. As Chopper gave him a look over, it was almost like he wasn't human entirely. Of course, he questioned whether or not he had a devil fruit ability that allowed him to do this. And, feeling like it was safe to let them in on the secret, Luffy and Vulko would reveal their secret identities, that they were actually Atlanteans. Well, at least in Vulko's case, Luffy was half Atlantean. Of course, Chopper would be absolutely blown back by this, mainly because Atlanteans were considered to be nothing more but a myth, especially in these days. The idea that Atlanteans were real and that he would actually be traveling with some, while that was a story in and of itself. Hell, if Kureha had known what they truly were, she probably might not have allowed them to leave herself just out of curiosity, as the powers that the Atlantean body gave, well, when it came to medical research, who knows what type of discoveries could come from it. Even Vivi would be shocked at the revelation of learning that she was not only traveling with just any pirate crew, but a pirate crew that was headed by a pair of Atlanteans, no less. This led to many more questions that she wondered, but Vulko made it very clear that under no circumstances were they to disclose this information publicly. It was already one thing to be a pirate crew, but if the world knew that this pirate crew had Atlanteans, well, any bounties that they were bound to get would go up 100-fold, maybe even 1,000 or 1,000,000, as they would now become the top priority of the world government to capture. Of course, even for Chopper and for Vivi, they had heard the rumors of how the world government wanted to get their hands on Atlanteans. But of course, as time had passed, the idea of actually coming across one or capturing one, well, it was considered more of a fool's gold than anything else. In fact, capturing an Atlantean, a real one, was almost put in the same breath as trying to find the One Piece. That was just how much of an impossibility that it felt. But that there were some in the world that knew they were out there. It was just whether or not you would be lucky, or in some cases, unlucky, to come across one. Especially one that you plan to capture, dead or alive. But, as Volko would put it, Atlanteans were a powerful people, capable in so many ways. In fact, the idea of an Atlantean eating a devil fruit was preposterous, because to do so, it would rob you of your rich ability, the ability to become one with the sea. That was a gift that could never be passed up. Luffy would nod in agreement, although Volko would bop him on the head. Ow! What was that for? Because, don't act like I forgot. You almost gave up such a gift. He did? Nami would ask. Oh yes, a long time ago, when he was young and dumb. He almost foolishly ate a devil fruit. I said I was sorry for that. I was frustrated. And you thought grabbing the first piece of food you got your hands on was going to help. I mean, you didn't even consider what was the possibilities. I mean, it was strange and purple with swirls. Did that look like any ordinary fruit to you? Well, maybe it was exotic. Ow! So what happened? Zoro would ask. Well, it all started about 7 years ago. Luffy and 2 of his friends had walked into a bar that was run by a close friend of ours, and a pirate crew stopped by. You probably know them as the red-haired pirates. You know the red-haired pirates? They would all say. They're captained by one of the emperors of the sea. He's called Shanks, right? That he is. And he actually found a home in good old Fuchsia Village. Luffy and I knew him well. This only continued to add to the number of questions that they had for them. Just exactly who were Luffy and Volko? And how on earth did they have connections to the likes of red-haired Shanks? But the story continued. You see, Luffy and his friends, as they entered into this tavern, were arriving just as Shanks had come by to celebrate. You see, Shanks had found the devil fruit, and they were looking to sell it off as such. But when another pirate crew came in and started causing a bit of a ruckus, Luffy tried to stand up for the red-haired pirates, and it didn't go quite well for him. They actually made him look like a fool. Shanks and the crew tried to laugh it off, but Luffy, well, in his anger, he was attempting to eat a devil fruit. I actually saw what was happening, and I stopped him in time. I stopped him from doing something as stupid as that, so he ran out into the tavern and decided to try to go for a swim to cool off. Yeah, I was really pissed that day. But what happened to the devil fruit? Oh, one of Luffy's friends ended up eating it instead, and he found himself cursed. Cursed with the body of rubber. Of rubber? A fruit called the gum fruit. It was said to give anyone the abilities and the properties of rubber, and with that, you'd never be able to swim. He really saved me from doing something stupid, Luffy would say. I can't imagine not being able to swim now. It's a part of who I am. That's why you have to be careful. You don't need something like a devil fruit. You're far above that. Your body will give you more advantage than any devil fruit you could ever imagine. Besides, Volko would say, most people in the world don't even know how to use a devil fruit properly. They just eat it, gain the powers, come up with a move or two, and they think that's the end-all be-all. But I can assure you of one thing. Devil fruits are not what they appear. They are far more sinister in nature. Huh? Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare you, Chopper, Volko would say. Not in a bad way, but just, they're not natural. Nothing's natural about a devil fruit. And even so, the deeper you dive into it, the more you discover their secrets and abilities. A lot of people barely scratch the surface with what their devil fruits can do. Yeah, but you can't admit, they are pretty cool though, Luffy would say. In fact, my big brother actually has one. Big brother, Zoro would say. Yeah, he left a while ago, and he went on to become a pirate. I'm trying to get up there just like him. Who's his brother? Nami would ask. Oh, no one major, Volko would say. Just a vice captain of the Whitebeard Pirates. Oh, what? Everyone would yell. He's a what? Vice captain of the Whitebeard Pirates? Who? The Flame Pirate. Porcus D. Ace. The young man who ate the flame fruit. And he travels across the sea on a ship of fire. He's a powerful individual. And who knows? You might just run into him on the Grand Line. This concludes One Piece, King of the Sea. What if Luffy was Aquaman? Season 2, Part 4. As always, if you enjoyed today's video and everything else that we have to offer, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is Power Core Productions and Podcastings that has to come out now and in the future. Stay tuned tomorrow as we continue with the mid-season finale for One Piece King of the Sea. What if Luffy was Aquaman? Season 2, Part 5, the mid-season finale as we enter into Alabasta. But anyway, that's going to do it for the end of today's video. I'm Javon Harrington with Power Core Productions and Podcastings, signing off, and I'll see you next time.